Welcome back to Fun Facts! And this is something I noticed. I wanted to make a video of it. I thought I'd make it Fun Facts. And I just want to preface this by saying that I thought about this for a little bit because I don't want it to be a rag on Dave Filoni, to be a negative video. Like I've said in some previous ones, it's not enjoyable for me to comment on it in that way, and it's not, I think, a good way to build the communities to talk about negative stuff. But there's a lot to say on a video I saw on Twitter. I ranted to a friend about with my unfiltered thoughts, but now I've thought about it, I thought of a good way of presenting this to you guys. Now, there's a video on Dave Filoni that was on the Star Wars show, and I want to frame it in a way that people can understand from the viewpoint of myself, obviously, but also I would think, for me looking at a couple of different perspectives on it, that it is not the viewpoint for a lot of other people, even in Lucasfilm. So I'll show the video and then I'll give my thoughts on it. So here we are, Dave Filoni on the Star Wars show. Let's have a listen and then I'll give my thoughts.
It's a funny thing, having been here a while and actually telling Star Wars stories. I'm in a very odd, unique position, which is that there's this notion that everything changed and when everything became Legends, and I can see why people think that. But having worked with George, I can tell you that it was always very clear, and he made it very clear, that the films and the TV shows were the only thing that he considered canon. That was it. Mm-hmm. So everything else was a world of fun ideas, exciting characters, great possibilities, but the EU was created to explore all those things. And I know, and I fully respect people's opinion about it, that some of the material said the next canon part of it, okay, but from the filmmaking world that I was brought into, the TV series, the films were it. Mm-hmm. They were set in stone. So it was not a big change for me when everyone was saying everything's Legend status now. I'm like, yeah, that's what I've always understood. It's all Legend status.
So yeah, that's interesting. So I want to go back. I'll stop it where it's at the point that I want to speak into.
The only thing that he considered canon.
So, films and TV shows were the only thing he considered canon. There is no actual quote that someone has on film, or even has written down, that clearly has the word canon stated by George Lucas and that sort of thing. And so you can't really go off the word of just George, but you have to go off of the word of Lucasfilm. And this is kind of the way that I look at it, especially with my defending the EU videos, that I did it this way. Because if you take a quote pre-2014, a lot of Lucasfilm was saying it's the official canon. And I can see where he can get the perspective that all the movies and the shows were set, but at the same time, stuff was made Legends, they were decanonized at the time of the shift in April 25th, 2014, that included TV shows like the Ewoks and the Droids cartoon, the holiday special, the 2 Caravan of Courage movies. They were TV movies, but they were movies nonetheless, and they were filmmaking. So it's not just that it's the filmmaking world either. But I will say this, from my big thing on this is, he says that there's this notion that everything changed when it became Legends. And I think that is very much true from two perspectives. I'm going to first say about the fan perspective. From a fan's point of view, which is me growing up and doing all of that, everything changed because it was one continuous storyline that, of course, it needed to have retcons because it was growing and developing as the Star Wars movies came out, and they didn't even, well, they sort of built the world of the continuity in a unique way for Star Wars. And so when the decanonization occurred, it was a step for a fan to have to go, wait, all of this stuff, over 300 books, over however many comics, all of the video games and stuff, and going, aren't canon now? And when they're marketed as such and all of that, as he said, things in books, things in all of that do say it continues to target is canon, because that was true at the time. Now, of course, now it isn't canon to the mainline Star Wars as they've decided to do it. But it did, I think, change a lot of fan perspectives, especially for the ones that read the EU, as he refers to it in there. He still refers to it as EU, and not the new stuff as EU. Anyway, chose a different direction as far as the fan goes, because it completely changed the direction of the story as well. Because when they made it Legends, they didn't continue producing content for that timeline. Like it or not, that's just facts. And whether you like the change, it also changed the direction of the story, especially post Return of the Jedi, when they first released The Force Awakens and the sequel trilogy. And we can all have opinions on it. I'm not as keen on it, but it's fine if other people like it. This is supposed to be me saying as a fan that things did change a lot. And you can't really disagree with that, because it made a lot of changes as well with the perspective as a fan in this section that I'm talking about. But secondly, I wanted to talk about the change in perspective to Lucasfilm itself from the point of view of the company. Now, 2012 was the buyout by Disney, and George Lucas sold and Kathleen Kennedy became president. We had 2 years where it was fine. The EU was continuing and all of that good stuff. And then when the decanonization announcement in April 25th, 2014, there's the 2 years sort of building up to it as well. There was a change in the company where they set up their new canon story group, and they definitely, after the decanonization, have a different focus as far as story goes because of that. And so I think there was a huge mindset shift and a huge shift in the company when they announced the decanonization of the expanded universe. Because from then on, they didn't produce any more EU, so that was different for them. They shifted the rights from Dark Horse into the in-house, when they're under Disney, Marvel. And so that completely changes sort of a relationship there. And it's sad how Dark Horse lost the rights, but that does happen, unfortunately. And so things change company-wise. Their relationships with the different companies, who knows how their relationship with Dark Horse is properly now, but they went to Marvel, so that's a definite change company-wise. But also the mindset of having a clean slate. So this is very much how I view the two timelines as well. I'm still a fan, so I'll explain it this way. The two timelines, everything but the episodic movies and the Clone Wars was just chucked away, and so they have a clean slate for everything, which is what they wanted. And that starts off a new timeline. It doesn't converge from a single point, but it's just, this is a separate timeline. They can run parallel, can do whatever. And for me, that's very much a thing of why did you discontinue the EU? Because very much from a company point of view, they also had no one covering EU stuff when it came out. Because they sort of had a few hangers on, and then they changed parts of the story. From a company point of view, the story group that they formed would have made decisions based on that. Like Tarkin, Heir to the Jedi, and Dark Disciple were originally written for the EU and then reportedly changed for the new canon. And there was also not really a transition period between EU and new canon when the new books came out and that. So there's a lot of confusing details in that. And anyway, from a company perspective, they changed their mindset. With Kathleen Kennedy in charge, and with this new story group formed, they did have a lot of change inside of Lucasfilm. And of course, you can see the quality of the content being reflected. When Disney came on, they said, we want you to make a movie every year. That deadline changed the way that Lucasfilm was working internally, because they had a lot of deadlines to have to live up to, and all of that stuff. As far as a company, you can't say nothing changed, because Filoni then didn't have to worry about, well, he didn't worry before, but he didn't have to worry about trying to fit Rebels in somewhere in a continuity thing, and didn't have to worry about continuity of other shows that he worked on in the future. Which, they're still having issues with their own continuity because of the way that they've set things up. They changed it from how the EU was, but yeah. And as a company level, G and T canon was the canon tiers that they had that apply to the EU. And so of course, those were what they took. And of course, that allowed George to change anything he wanted in the films and whatever, because he's the creator. And I think it's very different when it comes to someone that isn't George Lucas, because I think you would want to be beholden to at least his works, which is what they are doing. But also, he's the one that provided the information for a lot of the EU to be formed, like the origins of the Sith, stuff that happened in New Jedi Order. He may not have read it all, but he did do all that. He did have a lot of input into things. So as a fan, very much a big change as far as the story content, especially when the EU was not continued. And then as a company, very big structure change, very big change in the focus because of Disney asking them for more movies, and because they set deadlines and whatever reportedly, and a change of the internal structure and how they view things because of the actual content of the stuff that they are releasing. So yes. And some mindset changes are just things I notice when I see people sharing some things on Twitter, and from the actual content being produced, there's a different direction to the story. It's different because George Lucas isn't there, which is fine. And if you like it, it's fine. It's just, you can't say that it didn't change.
Some of the material said the next canon part of it. Okay.
So yeah, very much so. He thinks it's really a world of fun ideas. For sure they can do that. And it was very much so back in the Marvel days that they had more leeway with it. And why, when you have continuity, would you not have fun ideas explored in it? Like, that's the whole point of entertainment, is to have fun ideas. And he even himself says that the marketing of it and all that said the next canon part of it. And so he admits it. But the marketing and that, I think people do put too much importance on George Lucas's view on the expanded universe, because very much so Lucasfilm is an extension and does Star Wars, especially now. But Lucasfilm, if it wasn't canon, George Lucas would have vetoed anything that said this isn't canon, this isn't canon. This is canon, this is canon, and all of the marketing around it, saying this is the official continuation of the Star Wars saga, like it says on the Thrawn trilogy, and all of that. So that is something that I go, of course now it's not canon. They've decanonized it, and that's a decision they've made for better or for worse, whatever you think of it. But yes. very much how they marketed it, told everyone officially, because Lucasfilm is the official word on it, rather than George Lucas himself, who you could take a quote from both sides to say it's canon and not canon, although he did care about it, which I cover in my Defending the Expanded Universe series. Separate to the Is This Canon, because I say that Lucasfilm, as a company, can say things are canon versus George Lucas told his stories and then expanded off from what he started. But yeah, very much that. So anyway, yes.
But like, from the filmmaking world that I was brought into, the TV series, the films were it. Mm-hmm. They were set in stone. So
this is interesting. This is interesting because he was brought into the filmmaking side and all of that. And rather than having a broader perspective brought in, it may change the view you have on Star Wars material as a whole. Interesting that it would just have a different perspective on things. Because like, if you're one of the authors, and dare I say it, give an example, Karen Travis, she was most likely told that, okay, what you write about the Mandalorians, we've approved it, and this is part of the Star Wars continuity, and it's canon to the expanded universe and Star Wars as a whole now. And then when Dave Filoni created the Clone Wars and changed things, she didn't react in the best way possible, I don't think. Could have been calmer about it and whatever, but she has a valid reason for going, you didn't follow my law at all. So that's very much an example of it being not brilliant in the way of going, well, maybe if you were given a broader perspective and not just the filmmaking side, things may have turned out differently. And that's very much, I think, Dave Filoni's focus, and this is where he falls a bit short. This is my opinion, of course. With people saying that he should be president of Lucasfilm, he only has a filmmaking perspective, especially as he's admitting that right now. So he wouldn't be brilliant on knowing what to do for a larger, big picture point of view with the novels and the comics and everything else. Never mind, don't know how he is at businesses, don't know too much about him personally, but yeah, some thoughts. So back to it, I guess, the last 10 seconds.
It was not a big change for me when everyone was saying everything's legend status now. I'm like, yeah, that's what I've always understood. It's all legend status.
So yeah, very much so for him, it was completely separate because he was brought into the filmmaking world, and this is very much a personal viewpoint of him. This was very much him saying that he doesn't know the EU, basically. And I think that's evident in some things he's done. But he's basically going, well, everything was separate to him because he was brought into the filmmaking side of it rather than going and getting a bigger picture view of it, which I think you would need. Like, a lot of the authors of the EU did their research, enough at least, to be able to say, oh, I can connect some things together. Or it went through the continuity editor at Lucasfilm at the time to go, oh, maybe you could change something slightly to make it fit better and whatnot, and so on and so forth. So very much, I think, what I'm trying to get across here is a way of saying that I don't think Dave Filoni's personal point of view is correct. While it may be right for him, I don't think it reflects Lucasfilm's view as a whole, pre-2014, of what the EU actually was. And George, of course, had his own stories, but then he also dipped his hands into being consulted, checking off things on the list and everything, and approving each of the EU works, at least from a dot point of view, and he read a lot of the comics and was consulted, but that is for my other video to say about, with some quotes that are given in my Defending the Expanded Universe series that I did, to try and encapsulate everything that people would say about the EU in the best way possible. So editing me realised I forgot to say something I wanted to say as well, but with the whole George Lucas viewpoint thing, who cares? Because, and the canon status is like, who cares? The stories are still out there. They've always been there to enjoy. The canon status doesn't make them any less enjoyable. They're still great stories and they all interconnect with each other, which is awesome. Well, most of them. Some are doozies. But that's what you get with 37 plus years of content. And so, yeah, it really does not matter. It doesn't degrade, especially when people are using it to attack the expanded universe in its own way. Read the actual content that you're talking about, because otherwise you don't know what you're talking about, obviously. And when you're talking about stuff, actually research it and know about it when you're doing that sort of thing, because it's like some people say Skippy the Jedi droid is very common to people say that was a bad part of the EU, but that was never canon to the EU. It's like the Ewoks cartoons and the Ewoks comics and whatever have such wacky stuff, but it's not even meant to be taken literally. You know what I mean? Yeah, pretty much that. It's a repetitive argument, which is why my defending the EU videos are just there, and then if people want to watch them, then they can. I'll put a link in the description below. And also what got me thinking was him saying about legend status, which I think is interesting as a viewpoint of how it sounds when he says that. When he says legend status, basically it sounds like he's saying it's not canon, which is weird to me, because when it's called legends, a lot of the time when I think people talk about it, I think it just means the expanded universe, and I apply the canon tiers all the way inside of it. With Dave Filoni saying it more as a status, I'm even less inclined to call it legends actually, because that doesn't mean it's a timeline. As a status, it just means it's non-canon to the main timeline, so I'm like, what would I call things legends? I mean, it's the official term that they put on the expanded universe, but from the sound of it, you could infer a lot of meaning behind it, at least how I perceive that they're using it, and Dave's using it in that context of saying legend status means non-canon status, and there's no interior tiers or statuses or anything inside of it, which I think is actually could be a good argument to say I don't want to use the legends name, because it does mean something different to the expanded universe. Interesting to think about. What are your thoughts on that? I'm very interested to hear people think about that sort of thing. So I hope you get my point of view on that, and I did it in a way that is interesting for you. I just wanted to give some thoughts on it because it did make me angry initially, but I guess that's what I should expect. And as I rewatch it and think about it a bit calmer, it's very much Dave Filoni's personal point of view that he's talking about, rather than the point of view of Lucasfilm as a whole, because he was only introduced to the filmmaking side versus having a broader picture and being involved in the books and novels and comics and the video games even, and all of that. So yeah, that is that. So yeah, hope it was interesting. Subscribe for more regular EU content. Like the video if you like my thoughts. Comment what you think down below, because it's an interesting little segment, and I don't really want to have hate comments on Filoni and whatever, but I mean, I won't completely delete them, but I just won't support talking smack about people. But I think he's just, his personal viewpoint at the time he's saying this doesn't really reflect what actually happened as a whole, because as a fan and as a company, there were a lot of changes when the EU was decanonized and named Legends. Whereas he always viewed it as that, which is interesting, especially when it comes to continuity errors between the Clone Wars 2008 series and the rest of the expanded universe. So yeah, thank you, and I'll see you all in the next video. Hooray!